Millionaire CEO was ruthless until two twin girls walked into his office with a paper that made him cry. Just before we begin, your presence means a lot. Say hi and share where you're tuning in from, only if you want to. The first rays of dawn barely touched the New York skyline as Jason Blackwood's sleek black car pulled up to his towering glass building. At 6:30 a.m., most of the city still slumbered, but sleep was a luxury Jason had long ago sacrificed at the altar of success. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," the security guard called out, his greeting echoing in the marble lobby. Jason didn't bother to respond. His mind was already racing through the financial projections for Memorial Hospital, his company's latest acquisition. The demolition plans for the new luxury condominium development were waiting on his desk, ready for final approval. Another day, another fortune to be made. At 32, Jason had built the Blackwood Enterprises into an empire that cast shadows across the Manhattan skyline. 7 buildings bore his name, with an 8th under construction. But it wasn't his name that people whispered when he entered rooms. It was his nickname, Blackwood the Merciless. The private elevator whisked him to the 52nd floor where his assistant Margaret was already waiting, a steaming cup of black coffee in hand. For 15 years she'd witnessed his meteoric rise, adapting to his exacting standards and unpredictable moods. "Your 9 a.m. with the investors for the luxury condos is confirmed," she said, following him into his corner office. "The legal team delivered the final contracts for your signature." Jason nodded, setting his briefcase down beside a desk that cost more than most people's cars. The morning sun glinted off the golden skyscrapers outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, a kingdom of steel and glass he'd helped create. "The hospital board members?" he asked, his voice clipped as he opened the architectural renderings. "All signed the non-disclosure agreements," Margaret replied, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "They've been instructed not to inform staff of the closure until next month." Jason's eyes narrowed as he studied the blueprints for what would soon be the most exclusive address in Manhattan, where a century-old hospital currently stood. A hospital that served thousands of families would soon rise 50 stories of luxury apartments, starting at $12 million each. "Sir?" Margaret interrupted his thoughts. Security called. "There's an unusual situation in the lobby." Jason didn't look up. "Whatever it is, handle it. I need these projections completed before—" "It's family visit day for employees," she continued hesitantly. "Apparently there's been some confusion with—" The soft ping of his private elevator cut her off. Jason's head snapped up. Nobody used that elevator without authorization. Nobody. The doors slid open silently, and for a moment Jason thought the elevator was empty. Then his gaze dropped lower, and his breath caught in his throat. 2 identical little girls with fiery red hair stepped out hand in hand. They couldn't have been more than 6 years old, both wearing matching white dresses with pink ribbons in their hair. Their bright blue eyes surveyed his massive office without a trace of intimidation before settling directly on him. "Mr. Blackwood," one of the girls said, her voice small but remarkably steady. "We need to talk to you about our mommy's hospital." Margaret gasped softly, already reaching for the phone to call security, but Jason held up his hand, stopping her. For the first time in years, something had genuinely surprised him. And in his world of predictable business moves and calculated risks, surprise was a commodity rarer than the diamonds adorning his clients' necks. "And who," Jason asked, setting down his pen with deliberate slowness, "might you be?" The twins stood before Jason's imposing mahogany desk, their small hands clasped together like lifelines. Despite their matching appearance, he could already sense subtle differences. One gripped her sister's hand more tightly while the other's chin tilted upward with quiet determination. "Are you going to close Mommy's hospital?" the bolder one asked, her voice surprisingly clear in the cavernous office. Jason's gaze darted to Margaret, who was frantically whispering into her phone. "How did they get up here?" he mouthed silently. The security manager's voice crackled through the speakerphone. "Sir, I'm so sorry. They told Officer Davis they were your nieces. It's family visit day, and with all the children coming through, they were very convincing, sir. Jason turned his attention back to the twins, studying them more carefully. Their clothes, while clean and neat, showed signs of wear. The pink ribbons in their hair were slightly frayed at the edges, not the children of privilege he was accustomed to seeing. "What are your names?" he asked, his voice softer than intended. "I'm Lily," said the one who had spoken first. "And this is Lucy," she added, squeezing her sister's hand. Lucy, the quieter twin, reached into a small backpack and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. With solemn ceremony, she stepped forward and placed it on Jason's desk. Jason unfolded the paper to find a crayon drawing of a woman in a hospital bed. The artist had taken special care with the woman's smile, though the rest of her face appeared thin and pale. Multiple IV lines rendered in careful detail surprising for a child so young, connected to machines drawn in blue and green. He flipped the paper over. On the back, in careful childish printing, "Mommy is dying from cancer. The hospital says, the special medicine costs too much. We can help clean your office if you don't close the hospital." Something shifted in Jason's chest. A sensation so unfamiliar that it took him a moment to recognize it as emotion. Raw, unfiltered emotion. "Our mommy is a nurse." Lucy spoke for the first time, her voice softer than her sister's, but no less determined. "She helps sick people get better, but now she's the sick one. She works very hard," Lily added. "Sometimes she works 2 shifts so we can have pizza on Fridays." Jason stared at the twins, momentarily at a loss for words, a predicament he hadn't found himself in since taking control of his father's company at 32. These children had somehow bypassed his carefully constructed barriers, physical and emotional. "Mr. Blackwood?" Margaret's voice cut through his thoughts. "The board is waiting on the conference call, and security is on their way up to cancel the call." Jason interrupted, his voice strangely hoarse. "And tell security to stand down." Margaret froze, her hand still on the phone. In 15 years, she had never heard him cancel a board meeting. Never. Jason swiveled his chair to face the sprawling city view, desperate to regain his composure. But as he turned, a tear, something he hadn't allowed himself in decades, escaped and slid down his cheek. He wiped it away quickly, but not before. Margaret had seen it. Her mouth fell open in shock. "Sir, are you—" "I'm fine," he snapped. But his voice lacked its usual edge. The memory had ambushed him without warning. Himself at 7 years old, standing beside his mother's hospital bed, clutching a similar drawing while his father argued with doctors about experimental treatments that cost too much. The same helplessness he'd seen in the twins' eyes had once been his own, a feeling he'd buried beneath years of ruthless business decisions and emotional detachment. He turned back to the girls, who were watching him with an intensity that belied their age. In their innocent determination, he recognized something he'd lost long ago, the belief that speaking truth to power could make a difference. "Tell me more about your mother," he said, leaning forward. "Everything." As the twins began their story, Margaret slipped quietly from the room, wondering what kind of man would emerge from this unexpected encounter. For the first time in 15 years, she saw something in Jason Blackwood's eyes that she'd thought, long extinct humanity. "Your mother works at Memorial Hospital?" Jason asked, his voice gentler than it had been in years. Lily nodded eagerly. "For 8 years. She helps people with cancer. That's the same thing she has now." "Oncology department," Lucy added quietly, pronouncing the word with careful precision, clearly having heard it many times. Jason leaned back in his chair, the pieces falling into place. Memorial's oncology department was scheduled to be the first casualty in the transition. Its staff dispersed to other hospitals. Its research programs discontinued. High operation costs, low profit margins, a simple business decision. Until now. "How did you know I was going to close the hospital?" he asked. The twins exchanged a glance that seemed to contain an entire conversation. "We heard the doctors talking," Lucy said finally. "They said the man in the glass tower was going to close the hospital." "Mommy doesn't know we know," Lily added hastily. She thinks we're at Aunt Patty's house, but Aunt Patty had to work, so we came to find you instead. Mommy always says we should talk to people, not about them, Lucy explained with the innocent wisdom of a child. So we decided to talk to you. Jason felt something shift inside him, a glacier that had been frozen solid for 25 years beginning to crack. These children, the same age he had been when his mother was diagnosed, had shown more courage than most of the executives he dealt with daily. How old are you two? He asked, already suspecting the answer. 6, they replied in unison, holding up 6 fingers each. 6. The same age he had been when his mother first went into the hospital. 7 when she died. Treatment denied due to financial considerations, as his father had clinically explained it. This coincidence, a mother with cancer, twin daughters the same age he had been, struck him with such force that he had to grip the edge of his desk. Mr. Blackwood, Margaret had returned, hovering uncertainly at the door. Your 10 o'clock is here, and Mr. Walsh is demanding an update on the hospital acquisition. Jason stared at the architectural plans on his desk, the luxury condominiums that would replace Memorial Hospital. The penthouse alone would sell for $30 million, a sound investment. But as he looked at the twins' hopeful faces, he couldn't see the profit margins anymore. Instead, he saw himself at 7, standing at his mother's funeral, holding his father's cold hand and wondering why money mattered more than the woman who had read him bedtime stories every night. Cancel everything, he said abruptly, standing up. For the next 48 hours. Margaret's eyes widened. Everything? But sir, the investors will wait, he finished firmly. These young ladies and I have somewhere important to be. He walked around his desk and crouched down to the twins' eye level, something he hadn't done with any human being since his 30s. Up close, he could see the flecks of gold in their blue eyes, the light dusting of freckles across their noses. Would you like to take me to see your mother? He asked softly. Lily's eyes lit up. Yes, she's in room 415, that's the 4th floor. I know where the 4th floor is, Jason said with the ghost of a smile. I own the building, remember? Lucy, the quieter twin, studied his face with an intensity that made him feel transparent. Are you going to help our mommy? Jason met her gaze, finding himself unable to look away from those searching blue eyes. They seemed to cut through the carefully constructed facade he'd built over decades, seeing straight to the damaged 7-year-old boy who had promised himself he would never be powerless again. I'm going to try, he answered honestly. It was the first time in years he'd made a promise without calculating its return on investment. As he stood up, Margaret caught his eye, her expression a mixture of confusion and something else. Respect? Perhaps. Have my car brought around, he instructed her, and call Dr. Rivera at Memorial. Tell her I'm coming to see Amanda Thompson's case personally. How do you know my mommy's name? Lily asked, surprised. Jason tapped the hospital demolition plans. It's my job to know everyone who works there, he said. What he didn't mention was that he'd memorized the names of every department head who would be affected by the closure. Amanda Thompson, head oncology nurse, had been on that list. As he guided the twins toward the elevator, Margaret handed him his coat with a bemused expression. Should I cancel tomorrow as well? She asked quietly. Jason looked down at the little girls, who had somehow bypassed his security, his assistant, and the emotional walls he'd spent a lifetime building. Yes, he replied. I have a feeling this might take some time. The elevator doors closed on the 3 of them, the ruthless businessman and the twin daughters of a dying nurse, an unlikely trio united by a past that one had tried to forget, and a future the others feared to face. Memorial Hospital had stood in the heart of the city for over a century. Its white brick facade and large windows contrasted sharply with the sleek glass towers that Jason typically inhabited. As his private car pulled up to the entrance, he noticed details he'd overlooked during his previous visits with the acquisition team: the children's artwork decorating the windows, the small garden maintained by volunteers, the weathered bench, where an elderly man sat feeding pigeons. This is where we come to see Mommy, Lily explained, unbuckling her seatbelt with practiced ease. Sometimes we have to wait in the children's room if Mommy's having a bad day, Lucy added, her voice soft but matter-of-fact. Jason felt a twinge of something unfamiliar as he watched the twins navigate the hospital entrance with the confidence of children who had spent far too much time in such a place. They greeted the security guard by name and waved at the volunteer behind the information desk. "Good morning, girls," the elderly volunteer called out. Her smile faltered when she noticed Jason. "And who's your friend?" "This is Mr. Blackwood," Lily announced proudly. "He's going to help Mommy." The woman's face paled. Jason Blackwood was not unknown to the hospital staff. His company's impending takeover had been the subject of worried whispers for months. "Mr. Blackwood is visiting today," Jason said, uncomfortable with the hope in the twins' declaration. As they walked toward the elevator, Jason noticed heads turning, conversations stopping. A young doctor dropped his clipboard. A nurse whispered urgently into her phone. By the time they reached the 4th floor, he suspected half the hospital knew he was there. "Room 415 is this way," Lucy said, tugging gently at his hand. Jason hadn't realized she had taken his hand, and the simple gesture, the trust it implied, sent another crack through his carefully maintained facade. Dr. Rivera was waiting for them outside room 415, her expression a mix of professional courtesy and barely concealed suspicion. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, extending her hand. "This is unexpected." "I'd like to understand Nurse Thompson's case," he replied, keeping his voice neutral. Dr. Rivera's eyes darted to the twins, then back to Jason. "Perhaps we should speak privately." "They know," Jason said quietly. "More than you might think." The doctor nodded, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Ms. Thompson has stage 3 pancreatic cancer with limited metastasis. She was diagnosed 4 months ago. Her response to standard treatment has been less than optimal." "What are her options?" Jason asked. "There's a new immunotherapy trial showing promising results for her specific genetic markers. 65% chance of remission." Dr. Rivera hesitated. "But it costs $1.2 million and isn't covered by insurance. Without it." She glanced at the twins, lowering her voice. 8 months, maybe less. Jason absorbed this information, his mind automatically calculating figures. The cost of the treatment versus the profit margins on the hospital demolition. Numbers that had once seemed so important now felt hollow. "Can we see Mommy now?" Lily interrupted. Dr. Rivera smiled gently. "She's resting right now, but you can go in quietly." The twins needed no further invitation, slipping into the room with the quiet efficiency of children who had learned to make themselves small and unobtrusive in adult spaces. Jason followed more hesitantly. The hospital room was simple but personalized. A bow, small vase of wildflowers, children's drawings taped to the walls, a worn paperback novel on the bedside table. Amanda Thompson lay sleeping, her body seeming too small for even the narrow hospital bed. She was pale, her red hair, the same vibrant shade as her daughter's, forming a stark contrast against the white pillowcase. Even in sleep, there was a dignity to her that Jason couldn't help but respect. "She's having a good day today," Lucy whispered, climbing carefully onto a chair beside the bed. "See? Her breathing is smooth." "Dr. Rivera says the new medicine might make her all better," Lily added, taking her mother's limp hand with infinite gentleness. "Your father," Jason began carefully. "Is he?" "We don't have a daddy," Lucy stated without emotion. "His name was Kevin Wells," Lily elaborated. "But he left when Mommy was going to have us." "Mommy says he wasn't ready to be a father," Lucy added. "But she was ready to be a mother, so she had us anyway." Jason did the mental calculation. Amanda would have been around 28 when the twins were born. She had raised them alone while building her career as a specialized nurse. "She works in the children's cancer ward," Lily said proudly. "She helps kids who are sick like she is now." Jason moved to the window, needing a moment to compose himself. Below, construction crews were already marking underground utility lines for the planned demolition. The first step in erasing this century-old institution and replacing it with luxury condominiums. A memory surfaced. His mother's funeral 35 years ago. The rain. His father's stony silence. The emptiness that followed. He turned back to look at Amanda Thompson and her daughters, a family fighting to stay together against impossible odds. With a steady hand, he reached for the medical chart hanging at the foot of the bed, skimming the details of her condition and treatment plan. When he set it down, something had changed in his expression. The businessman who had entered the hospital was receding, and someone else, someone he had buried long ago, was emerging in his place. "Girls," he said softly, "I need to speak with Dr. Rivera again. Will you be all right for a few minutes?" The twins nodded, their attention already returning to their mother, whose eyelids had begun to flutter. As Jason stepped into the hallway with the doctor, he knew the decision he was about to make would alter the course of multiple lives, including his own. 3 days had passed since Jason first met the twins, 3 days of ceaseless activity as he moved between hospital board meetings, consultations with medical specialists, and late-night sessions with his legal team. The dark circles under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion, but there was a newfound energy in his stride that his employees had never witnessed before. Through discreet inquiries, he'd learned more about Amanda Thompson. She had graduated top of her class from nursing school, turning down more lucrative positions to specialize in pediatric oncology. Hospital records showed she routinely stayed hours after her shifts ended. Colleagues spoke of how she used her own salary to help families cover expenses insurance wouldn't, small things like parking fees, meal vouchers, and occasionally prescription copays. "She believes no one should face cancer alone," one nurse had told him, eyeing him suspiciously. "Especially not children." Now, Jason stood in the doorway of room 415, watching as Amanda stirred from her medication-induced sleep. The twins had been temporarily entrusted to their Aunt Patty, a fellow nurse who had volunteered to take them for a proper meal and some fresh air. Amanda's eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding her features as she registered his presence. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by wariness. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice raspy from disuse. "I thought you might be a dream, or perhaps a nightmare." Despite her condition, there was steel in her gaze, the same quiet determination he had seen in her daughter's eyes. "Your daughters are quite persuasive," he replied, stepping into the room. Amanda struggled to sit up. "My daughters? What are you talking about?" Jason explained their unexpected visit to his office, watching as emotions played across her face. Shock, embarrassment, and finally, a mother's fierce pride. "They shouldn't have bothered you," she said, a flush rising to her pale cheeks. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," Jason said, taking a seat beside her bed. "They showed more courage than most adults I deal with." Amanda studied him, her professional assessment mixing with personal curiosity. "Why are you here, Mr. Blackwood? Surely not to personally inform me that my workplace will be demolished." "I'm here to discuss your treatment options," he replied, evenly. Her laugh was bitter. "Treatment options? There aren't any. Not ones I can afford. But don't worry, I've made arrangements for the girls. My sister in Philadelphia will take them after." She couldn't finish the sentence. "There's an immunotherapy trial," Jason said. "Dr. Rivera believes you're an ideal candidate. At $1.2 million, might as well be $1.2 billion. She shook her head. "I've made my peace with reality, Mr. Blackwood. I suggest you do the same with whatever guilt my daughters manage to inspire." "What if cost wasn't an issue?" Amanda's eyes narrowed. "Everything has a cost. I learned that long ago." "I want to cover your treatment," Jason said simply. "All of it." Silence filled the room. Amanda stared at him, disbelief written across her features. "Why would you do that?" she finally asked. "You don't know me." "Consider it an investment." Her expression hardened. "I don't need charity, Mr. Blackwood, especially not from someone who plans to demolish the only place that helps families like mine." Jason leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intensity he rarely revealed. "This isn't charity, Ms. Thompson. It's a second chance, something my own mother never got. The vulnerability in his voice seemed to surprise them both. He hadn't planned to reveal that piece of his past, but something about Amanda's dignity demanded honesty. "Your mother?" she asked softly. "Cancer. I was 7. The experimental treatment that might have saved her was deemed financially impractical by those making decisions." He straightened his tie, a nervous habit from childhood. "I'm now in a position to make different decisions." Amanda looked away, blinking rapidly. "It's not that simple. There's my job, the girls' school, a lifetime of follow-up care if it even works. And I still have my pride." "Pride won't raise your daughters," Jason said gently. "Trust me, I've lived with nothing but pride for decades. It makes for cold company." Their eyes met. Two strangers connected by the rawness of human suffering and the unexpected possibility of hope. "What about the hospital?" she asked finally. "Will you still close it?" Jason stood and walked to the window. Outside, the construction markers were still visible, the future of the century-old institution hanging in the balance. "One battle at a time," he answered, turning back to her. "First, we focus on your treatment." The word "we" hung between them, an unexpected bridge across vastly different worlds. Amanda closed her eyes, her internal struggle visible in the tension of her shoulders. Pride versus practicality, dignity versus necessity, principle versus her daughter's future. "The treatment begins tomorrow," Jason said quietly, "unless you tell me not to make the arrangements." When Amanda opened her eyes again, they glistened with unshed tears. "For my daughters," she whispered. "Only for them." Jason nodded, understanding completely. "For your daughters," he agreed. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Your girls won't need to draw any more requests for help, Ms. Thompson. I promise you that." In the hallway, his legal team waited with documents requiring his signature. The top page bore the header: Memorandum of Indefinite Suspension, Memorial, Hospital Acquisition and Development Project. He signed without hesitation, ignoring the shocked expressions of his attorneys. For the first time in his adult life, Jason Blackwood had made a business decision that the balance sheets couldn't justify, and he didn't regret it for a moment. Over the next 2 weeks, Jason's life underwent a transformation that left his employees whispering in the hallways. For the first time in his career, he delegated significant responsibilities to his executive team. Meetings that once required his presence were now handled by vice presidents. His private line, once constantly buzzing with calls, now went to voicemail after 3 p.m. The stock price of Blackwood Enterprises dropped 3% amid rumors of the CEO's midlife crisis. But Jason barely glanced at the reports Margaret still dutifully placed on his desk each morning. Instead, his afternoons were spent in the pediatric waiting room of Memorial Hospital, where Lily and Lucy waited while their mother underwent the grueling first phase of immunotherapy. He taught Lily the fundamentals of chess while Lucy drew elaborate pictures of princesses who looked suspiciously like hospital staff. "Your knight can't move that way," Jason explained gently to Lily, "but the horse should be able to jump over things," she argued logically. Jason, who had reduced Fortune 500 CEOs to stammering uncertainty, found himself outmaneuvered by a 6-year-old's reasoning. The nurses watched with barely concealed fascination as the notorious Blackwood the Merciless arrived each day with books, art supplies, and once, awkwardly braided pigtails for both. Girls after watching online tutorials on his phone the night before. When his public relations team suggested leveraging the situation for positive press coverage, Jason fired the marketing director on the spot. "They're not a photo opportunity," he said coldly, his old edge momentarily returning. Nevertheless, a tabloid photographer captured an image of the three of them leaving a bookstore, the girls laughing as Jason carried their purchases. The headline, "Blackwood's Heart Melted by Twins," prompted an emergency board meeting about his emotional instability. "Your behavior is concerning shareholders," Harrison Walsh, his CFO, informed him bluntly. "These children are becoming a distraction from your responsibilities." Jason straightened a framed drawing on his desk, the twins' original artwork now professionally preserved. "Schedule a press conference," he replied calmly. It's time I explained a few things about the future direction of this company. As he left the meeting, his phone chimed with a text from Lucy. Mommy smiled today during breakfast. For the first time in decades, Jason Blackwood smiled too. Not the calculated smile of business victory, but something genuine that reached his eyes. 1 month into the treatment, Dr. Rivera called Jason to her office. He arrived expecting the worst. He'd researched enough about cancer treatment to know that early setbacks were common. Instead, she greeted him with a cautious smile. The preliminary scans show better response than expected. The cancer cells are reacting positively to the first phase of immunotherapy. Meaning? Jason asked, hardly daring to hope. Meaning she's responding well, Dr. Rivera explained. It's early, but this is what we want to see. That afternoon, Amanda was able to sit up in bed for longer than she had in weeks. The twins organized a small celebration with cupcakes. Jason had brought chocolate for Lucy, strawberry for Lily, and vanilla for their mother. Ms. Peters let me make up my math test, Lily announced, carefully breaking her cupcake in half to make it last longer. I got an A-, and I painted a dolphin. In art class, Lucy added. The teacher put it on the wall with the special stickers. Amanda watched as Jason listened intently to each girl, his eyes tracking their animated movements with protective attention. Gone was the ruthless businessman whose name had made hospital staff tremble just a month earlier. In his place sat someone transformed, someone who laughed at Lily's jokes and praised Lucy's detailed descriptions of her artwork. When the girls eventually fell asleep, Lucy curled in the armchair, Lily on the small cot. Amanda turned to Jason. You don't realize what you're doing, she said softly. Jason looked up from his laptop where he'd been reviewing hospital budget proposals. What do you mean? You're giving them something I thought they'd never have again, she explained, her voice catching. Hope. Uncomfortable with gratitude, Jason closed his computer. I'm not doing this just for you, he admitted. Somehow it's helping me fix something that broke a long time ago. Amanda studied him, her nurse's intuition seeing past his carefully constructed facade. Your mother? Jason nodded, offering no further explanation. But it was the first time he'd acknowledged his vulnerability to anyone in decades. A small crack in the armor he'd spent a lifetime building. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the soft breathing of the sleeping twins and the muted hospital sounds beyond the door. The treatment's working, Jason finally said, changing the subject. Amanda nodded, cautious optimism in her eyes. For now. It'll keep working, he insisted with the same determination that had built his empire. She smiled faintly. Is that an order, Mr. Blackwood? Consider it a strongly worded suggestion, he replied, the ghost of humor softening his features. In that moment, something shifted between them, a bridge forming across vastly different worlds, connected by 2 sleeping children and the fragile promise of tomorrow. 2 months into the treatment, Amanda faced a difficult phase of chemotherapy that required extended hospitalization. The aggressive protocol left her exhausted and vulnerable to infection, requiring isolation during her weakest periods. Jason, recognizing the twins couldn't stay in the hospital waiting room indefinitely, made an unexpected decision. He converted one of the spare bedrooms in his penthouse for the girls on days when Amanda's treatments were most intense. Are you sure about this? Margaret asked as she watched professional decorators transform the minimalist guest room into what could only be described as an enchanted forest, complete with star projections on the ceiling. No, Jason admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. When the twins first visited, they stood wide-eyed in the doorway, momentarily speechless. A rare occurrence, especially for Lily. Is this for us? Lucy finally whispered. Just for the days when your mom needs extra rest, Jason explained, suddenly uncertain. Had he overstepped? Gone too far? But then Lily launched herself at him, wrapping small arms around his waist in the first hug he'd received in years. Lucy joined more hesitantly, her quiet thank you barely audible. That evening, after they'd explored every corner of their temporary haven, Lucy looked up from arranging stuffed animals on her bed. Can we bring a picture of Mommy? She asked. So she's here with us even when she's not. Jason nodded, throat unexpectedly tight. After driving the girls back to the hospital that night, he returned to his apartment and opened the bottom drawer of his desk, the only one that had remained locked for decades. Inside lay photographs of Catherine Blackwood, his mother. Her kind eyes and gentle smile looked back at him from faded images. One showed her in nursing scrubs, arm around a younger colleague. Another captured her reading to Jason on her hospital bed, determined to maintain normalcy despite her illness. Beneath the photos, he found a folded piece of paper, his mother's dream, sketched out during her final months. A comprehensive cancer treatment center, accessible to all regardless of financial means. Because everyone deserves a fighting chance, she had written across the top. Jason reached for his phone and dialed the architect responsible for the luxury condominium project. "It's Blackwood," he said without preamble. "Change of plans. I want an oncology center instead, and I want construction to begin immediately." "But sir," the architect protested, "the condominium plans are already approved. The investors will be compensated," Jason interrupted. "This isn't negotiable." After hanging up, he returned to the drawer and gently placed one of his mother's photos in a simple silver frame. Tomorrow, he would help the twins select a picture of Amanda for their room. Side by side, the two photos would connect past to present, beginning the healing of a wound 35 years in the making. 3 months into Amanda's treatment, an unexpected setback emerged. A severe infection compromised her already fragile immune system, necessitating emergency surgery. Dr. Rivera's face was grave as she explained the situation to Jason outside Amanda's room. The immunotherapy was working well, but this infection has complicated matters, she said quietly. "The next 48 hours will be critical." Jason nodded, his expression betraying none of the turmoil beneath. Through the window, he could see the twins sitting beside their mother's bed, their small faces solemn as they showed her drawings they'd made at school that morning. "What do I tell them?" he asked. Dr. Rivera sighed. "The truth, but with hope. They're remarkably resilient children, Mr. Blackwood." "They shouldn't have to be," he replied. That afternoon, Jason canceled his attendance at the International Finance Summit in Tokyo, an event he hadn't missed in 15 years. His phone rang incessantly as news of his withdrawal spread through business circles. Blackwood Enterprises shares down 7% in after-hours trading, Margaret informed him tentatively as she brought documents requiring his signature to Amanda's hospital room. "Let them fall," he replied, not looking up from the children's book he was reading to Lily while Lucy colored quietly. His CFO called twice, demanding explanations. The second time, Jason simply disconnected the call. Instead of investor relations, he focused on inventing elaborate stories about warrior princesses who fought shadow monsters. Tales that had Lucy and Lily hanging on every word, momentarily distracted from their mother's declining condition. That night, after Amanda was wheeled into surgery, Jason took the twins back to his penthouse. He supervised their homework, ordered their favorite pizza, and helped them prepare for bed in the enchanted forest room. Only after they finally succumbed to exhaustion did he allow himself a moment of vulnerability. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his living room, he stared out at the city he'd helped shape. 52 stories below, construction crews worked through the night on the foundation of the Catherine Blackwood Oncology Center. The blue construction lights illuminated a massive excavation where luxury condominiums were once planned. His phone vibrated with a message from Dr. Rivera. "Surgery complete. Critical but stable. Next 24 hours will tell." Jason pressed his forehead against the cool glass, confronting an uncomfortable truth. Nothing in his decades of corporate acquisitions, hostile takeovers, or billion-dollar negotiations had prepared him for this moment. Standing in the cavernous silence of his penthouse, terrified that 2 small girls might lose their mother, just as he had lost his. For all his wealth and power, he remained helpless against the most fundamental human vulnerability. No amount of money could guarantee Amanda's survival. No business strategy could protect the twins from potential heartbreak. The realization was both humbling and clarifying. The empire reflected in the glass before him. The towers and developments that bore his name suddenly seemed hollow compared to the genuine joy he'd felt watching Lily master her first chess opening, or hearing Lucy explain the intricate backstory of her latest drawing. His phone rang again, this time the hospital. Jason answered immediately, his heart pounding. "Mr. Blackwood?" It was Dr. Rivera, her voice tired but steady. "Amanda made it through surgery. Her vitals are stabilizing. It's still touch and go, but she's fighting." "Thank you," he managed, the relief almost overwhelming. After hanging up, he returned to check on the twins. They slept peacefully, Lily's arm protectively draped over her sister. On the nightstand stood the framed photograph of Amanda they'd selected, placed beside the picture of Catherine Blackwood, past and present side by side. Jason adjusted their blankets and quietly closed the door. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for tonight, two little girls would sleep without knowing how close they'd come to a tragedy he understood all too well. He vowed they never would. 4 months after meeting the twins, Jason faced the most significant challenge to his corporate authority in a decade. The boardroom of Blackwood Enterprises, usually a place of deference to his decisions, had become a battleground. Harrison Walsh, the CFO, stood at the head of the table, projecting financial charts that painted a concerning picture. The Catherine Blackwood Oncology Center will generate an estimated annual loss of $15 million, he concluded, turning to face the assembled board members. This follows the $250 million write-off from canceling our most profitable real estate development in a decade. Murmurs rippled through the room as Walsh continued his presentation. Furthermore, Mr. Blackwood has personally authorized over $3 million in experimental treatments for a single patient, donated an additional $5 million to pediatric cancer research, and spent countless working hours at Memorial Hospital, rather than focusing on core business objectives. The projection changed to a graph showing Blackwood Enterprises' stock performance, a steady decline over recent months. "The shareholders are concerned," Walsh stated bluntly. "They're questioning your judgment, Jason. Some have suggested a temporary leave of absence might be appropriate while you work through this personal matter." Jason remained still, absorbing the challenge without visible reaction. He had anticipated this confrontation since the day he signed the documents halting the hospital demolition. "Is that all, Harrison?" he asked quietly when the CFO finally finished. "I believe the numbers speak for themselves," Walsh replied, confidence evident in his stance. He had clearly expected Jason to be defensive, perhaps even combative. Instead, Jason nodded thoughtfully. "They certainly tell a story," he agreed, rising from his chair, "but not the complete one." Jason walked to the conference room wall where corporate awards and recognitions created an impressive display of achievement. He removed a simple black frame that held the company's founding principles, written by his father 40 years earlier. "Blackwood Enterprises exist to create exceptional value through strategic development and investment," he read aloud. "My father wrote these words, and for most of my career I've interpreted value solely in financial terms." He set the frame down and pulled something from his suit pocket, the twins' original drawing now professionally preserved. 4 months ago, these two little girls walked into my office and changed everything," he said, displaying the childish artwork. "Not because they made me sentimental, but because they made me remember." For the first time in his professional career, Jason shared the story of his mother, her work as a nurse, her diagnosis, his father's refusal to sacrifice financial security for experimental treatment, and her subsequent death when Jason was just 7 years old. "I built this company into what it is today by becoming exactly what my father wanted. A businessman who never let emotion cloud judgment," he said, his voice steady, despite the personal nature of his words. "In the process, I buried the part of me that once wanted to fulfill my mother's dream of accessible healthcare." He projected his own slide, blueprints for the Catherine Blackwood Oncology Center. "This isn't a deviation from our mission. It's a return to what should have been our purpose all along. Creating value isn't just about profit margins, it's about improving lives." Walsh shook his head. "That's admirable, Jason, but we have a fiduciary responsibility to our shareholders. Sentimentality has no place in business decisions of this magnitude. Then put it to a vote, Jason challenged. My leadership against your vision of the company's future. The tension in the room was palpable as ballots were distributed. After 30 tense minutes of voting and counting, Jason maintained his position by the narrowest margin in company history. There is, however, one condition, the board chairman stated. The philanthropic initiatives must be funded primarily through your personal fortune, not corporate resources. Jason's smile held no humor. Agreed, he said. And I'll buy out any board member who disagrees with the new direction of this company. As executives filed out, several avoiding his gaze, Jason remained at the table looking at the twins' drawing. The small notation in the corner, the one that had first brought tears to his eyes, remained his private reminder of why this fight was worth every penny it would cost him. 6 months into the experimental treatment marked a significant milestone. The halfway point of the immunotherapy protocol coincided with the twins' 7th birthday. It also marked a transition to a less aggressive phase of treatment, as Amanda's latest scans showed a remarkable 70% reduction in tumor markers. Dr. Rivera had cautioned against excessive celebration. We're seeing excellent results, but we're not at the finish line yet, she'd explained during their weekly consultation. Nevertheless, Jason couldn't help but feel hopeful as he organized a small birthday celebration in the hospital's new therapeutic garden, still under construction, but specially prepared for the occasion. The space, once a neglected courtyard, was being transformed as part of the Catherine Blackwood Oncology Center development. Construction crews had worked through the night to create a temporary oasis. Potted trees, flowering plants, and comfortable seating arranged beneath a pergola adorned with fairy lights. Amanda arrived in a wheelchair, visibly fragile but stronger than she'd been in months. Her red hair was growing back in wispy patches, and though still thin, her face had regained some color. Most importantly, her eyes held something that had been missing for too long: hope. This is beautiful, she whispered as a nurse helped her into a comfortable chair positioned at the head of a small table decorated with balloons and streamers. Lucy and Lily entered the garden with matching expressions of wonder, their school backpacks still slung over their shoulders. They'd come directly from their first-grade classroom, where they'd recently returned to attending half-days. Is this all for us? Lily asked, spinning to take in the transformed space. Happy birthday, Jason said simply. The celebration was modest by Blackwood standards: a small cake, carefully selected presents, and the company of the small circle of people who had become instrumental in their lives. Dr. Rivera stopped by, briefly, as did a few nurses who had grown attached to the family. Even Margaret made an appearance, bringing handmade cards from the Blackwood Enterprises staff who had come to know the twins through their occasional visits to Jason's office. Amanda had prepared for this day during her stronger moments, carefully, wrapping presents for each daughter, used books of their favorite stories purchased with the little she'd managed to save. These aren't much, she apologized as the girls unwrapped their gifts. They're perfect, Lucy whispered, running her fingers reverently over the worn cover of The Secret Garden. This one still smells like library, Lily declared happily, inhaling the pages of A Wrinkle in Time with satisfaction. Jason had struggled with what to give them, conscious of the balance between generosity and excess. In the end, he'd chosen a chess set for Lily, handcrafted by an artisan from sustainable wood, and a professional quality art set for Lucy, complete with a carrying case bearing her initials. When it came time to blow out their candles, now officially 7 years old, the twins insisted their mother join them at the table. Make a wish, Amanda instructed with a smile that reached her eyes for the first time in months. The girls closed their eyes, their expressions serious with the weight of their wishes, then blew out the candles in perfect unison. Later, as Amanda rested and the twins explored the garden with Margaret, Dr. Rivera pulled Jason aside. The treatment is working better than we anticipated, she said quietly. If this continues, we could be looking at complete remission within months. Jason nodded, allowing himself the luxury of hope while keeping his expectations measured. And long-term? With this response rate, 5-year survival odds increase significantly. It's still a serious diagnosis, but she smiled. Your investment is paying dividends, Mr. Blackwood. As Jason watched the twins chase a butterfly between newly planted saplings, he realized they had given him something unexpected. Before leaving the garden to return to his office, they presented him with a carefully framed drawing. The 4 of them standing together beneath a sunny sky with the simple inscription, "Our Family." In the bottom corner, a small note had been added. "Thank you for fixing Mommy instead of breaking the hospital." Jason carefully placed the frame on his desk, next to the original drawing that had started this journey, a visual reminder that, while he had thought he was saving Amanda and the twins, they had been rebuilding something within him that he thought was lost forever. 7 months into Amanda's treatment, her progress had exceeded even Dr. Rivera's optimistic projections. The aggressive combination of immunotherapy and targeted treatments had reduced the tumor markers to barely detectable levels, and for the first time, the word remission appeared in her medical reports, albeit with cautious qualifiers. Amanda's strength returned gradually, allowing for short daily walks in the nearly completed therapeutic garden. On a crisp autumn afternoon, she and Jason sat on a bench beneath a Japanese maple, its leaves a brilliant crimson against the blue sky. The twins were inside with their tutor, catching up on schoolwork they'd missed. "Why did you really decide to help us, Jason?" Amanda asked suddenly, breaking their companionable silence. "And don't tell me it was just because of the girl's drawing." Jason watched a leaf spiral downward, buying time before answering. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved from awkward gratitude to something approaching friendship, but he still maintained careful boundaries around certain topics. "You've never told me the whole story," she pressed gently. "I think I deserve to know." She was right, of course. After all they'd been through, she deserved the truth. "My mother's name was Catherine Blackwood," he began, his voice low. "She was a nurse like you. Oncology department at Mercy General." Amanda listened silently as he continued. "She was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 7. Stage 3, aggressive type. This was 35 years ago. Treatments weren't as advanced, but there were experimental options." Jason's gaze remained fixed on the garden path. "My father, Henry Blackwood, was building his company at the time. The treatment that might have saved her would have cost nearly everything he had. He refused to mortgage our future, as he put it." "I'm so sorry," Amanda whispered. "After she died, he never mentioned her again, not once. He transformed the company into an empire, but her name became forbidden in our home." Jason turned to meet Amanda's eyes. "I grew up determined to amass so much power and wealth that I would never be helpless again." "And you succeeded," she observed. "Yes, I became exactly what my father wanted. Ruthlessly effective, emotionally detached, focused entirely on expansion and profit." His laugh held no humor. "I even outdid him. Where he built houses, I built towers. Where he acquired small businesses, I swallowed corporations." Amanda reached out, hesitantly placing her hand over his. "Until 2 little girls walked into your office. The drawing didn't just remind me of my mother," Jason admitted. "It reminded me of who I wanted to be before I became my father." Truth finally spoken aloud after decades of silence hung between them. "The Catherine Blackwood Oncology Center," Amanda said softly. "It's for her." Jason nodded. The center she wanted to build, accessible care for everyone regardless of their financial situation. "Your father wouldn't fund her treatment, so now you're funding everyone else's," Amanda observed with the quiet insight he'd come to value. "You're rewriting the ending." "Trying to," he acknowledged. They sat in silence for several minutes, watching the gardeners plant bulbs that wouldn't bloom until spring, an act of faith in a future they couldn't see yet. "Thank you for telling me," Amanda finally said. "Thank you for asking," he replied. "No one has in a very long time." As they made their way back toward the hospital, moving slowly to accommodate Amanda's still limited stamina, she paused. "You know, your mother would be proud of you," she said. Not for the buildings with your name on them, but for this, for becoming the man she raised you to be, even if it took a while to find your way back. Jason didn't trust himself to respond, but as they continued walking, something shifted within him. A weight he'd carried for 35 years finally beginning to lift. Behind them, the construction crews continued work on the Catherine Blackwood Oncology Center, its foundation now complete and walls beginning to rise, a legacy different from the one he had planned, but perhaps closer to the one he was meant to build all along. 8 months into the treatment process, with Amanda responding well and participating in an advanced clinical trial, Jason began a secret project with the twins. On afternoons when they visited his office, now modified with a small children's desk in the corner, they would huddle together over architectural plans spread across his conference table. What if Mommy's room had windows that faced the ocean? Lily suggested, carefully erasing and redrawing a section of the blueprints, so she can see dolphins when she wakes up. Excellent point, Jason agreed, making a note for the contractor. And what color should we paint it? Blue, Lucy decided, after thoughtful consideration. Light blue like the sky when it's happy. The blueprints belonged to a seaside property in Rhode Island, a house Jason had purchased years earlier as an investment and largely forgotten. Now, the three of them were redesigning it together, creating a place where Amanda could continue her recovery away from the city's pollution and pace. Will there be a garden? Lucy asked, looking up from her meticulous drawing of flower beds. Mommy loves gardens. 2 acres of gardens, Jason confirmed. And the groundskeeper says there's a family of rabbits living near the rose bushes. Both girls' eyes widened at this information, immediately launching into animated discussion about possible names for the rabbits. While the twins focused on designing the perfect bedroom for their stuffed animals, Jason worked with specialized attorneys to structure a trust fund for the girls and a partial property transfer for Amanda. The legal framework was complex, ensuring long-term financial security without compromising her ongoing medical treatment or benefits. Are you certain about these decisions, Mr. Blackwood? Thomas Chen, his personal attorney, asked privately, during a review of the documents. These are essentially irrevocable transfers of significant assets. Jason glanced through his office door where Lucy was helping Margaret learn to draw a unicorn, while Lily explained the rules of chess to a bewildered intern. For the first time in my life, Jason replied, I'm making decisions without calculating. The bottom line. The legal team worked discreetly, keeping the project confidential at Jason's request. He wanted everything in place before presenting it to Amanda, not as charity, but as a structured path forward for her and the girls. During one of their office sessions, Lily looked up from her work with an uncharacteristically serious expression. Mr. Jason, when Mommy gets all better, will we still see you? The question caught him off guard. In his focus on Amanda's treatment and the practical arrangements for their future, he hadn't considered what his own role might be once the immediate crisis passed. Would you want to? He asked carefully. The twins exchanged one of their silent communications, a glance that contained an entire conversation. Yes, Lucy answered simply. You're our friend now. You teach me chess, Lily added practically. And you know how to make voices for all the characters when you read stories, Lucy continued. Plus, you need someone to help you pick better ties, Lily concluded with a giggle, pointing to his conservative navy silk tie. That evening, after the twins had been picked up by their Aunt Patty, Jason stood at his office window watching the sunset paint the city in gold. On his desk lay finalizing documents for the Rhode Island property renovation, along with financial projections for the Catherine Blackwood Oncology Center, now halfway to completion. Both projects represented significant investments with no financial return, decisions that would have been unthinkable to the man he was before meeting Lily and Lucy. Yet as he signed the final authorizations, he felt no regret, only a quiet certainty that he was finally building something that mattered. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. Mr. Blackwood, Margaret's voice announced. Dr. Rivera is on line 1 with Amanda Thompson's latest test results. Jason reached for the phone, still watching the sunset transform the city he'd helped shape. A city that, for the first time, seemed to hold the promise of more than just profit. 9 months after the twins first marched into Jason's office, Dr. Rivera delivered the news they had all been hoping for. Amanda Thompson was officially in remission, though she would require consistent monitoring for the next 5 years. The experimental treatment had worked beyond even the most optimistic projections. The cancer cells have shown no activity for the past 6 weeks, Dr. Rivera explained during their final consultation. Your case is actually helping us secure broader insurance coverage for this treatment protocol. You're setting a precedent, Amanda. While Jason helped Amanda navigate the complex paperwork for her ongoing health insurance, now that her case had established legal precedent for experimental treatment coverage, the twins explored his home office, their curiosity emboldened by months of growing familiarity. Lucy, the quieter of the pair, opened a decorative wooden box on a shelf, discovering it contained small keys. With the innocent logic of 7-year-olds, she and Lily decided to find what these keys might unlock. Their search led them to a locked drawer in Jason's desk, which, after a whispered debate about whether this might be crossing a line, they carefully opened. Inside wasn't the treasure they half expected, but a leather portfolio filled with envelopes, each bearing their names. "What are you two investigating?" Jason asked, entering the room just as they were examining their discovery. The girls jumped, guiltily, but Jason's expression held amusement rather than anger. "We found letters with our names," Lily explained, her natural boldness reasserting itself. "Are they for us?" Jason sat down beside them, taking the portfolio gently. "Yes, they are, though I hadn't planned to show you quite yet." Inside were letters addressed to Lily and Lucy Thompson, dated for future birthdays, one for each year until they turned 21. "I wrote these during the nights I couldn't sleep," Jason admitted, "when your mother's treatment was uncertain." "R.E. they sad letters?" Lucy asked softly. "Some are," he acknowledged, "but mostly they're about things I hope for you. What I think you might be doing when you're 12 or 16 or 20. Adventures you might have, books you might love, places you might go." "But why?" Lily asked, direct as always. Jason considered, his answer carefully. "I've learned something important from your mother. Love means being present not just when it's easy, but for all the moments that matter, even the ones we might miss." The twins digested this, exchanging one of their silent glances that contained entire conversations. "So even if you couldn't be there for something important, we'd still have your words," Lucy reasoned, grasping the concept with surprising maturity. "Exactly," Jason confirmed. "No matter what happens, I wanted you to have something for those important days." That evening, after the twins had fallen asleep in their enchanted forest room, now a permanent fixture in Jason's apartment for their regular stays, Amanda and Jason sat on his penthouse terrace. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the distant sounds of the city below. "The girls told me about the letters," Amanda said, wrapping her cardigan more tightly around her shoulders. Jason nodded, a touch embarrassed. "They found them before I was ready." "It's a beautiful gesture," she said, "but it makes me wonder, what are your plans now, Jason?" "Plans?" "For your involvement with us," she clarified. "The crisis is passing. I'll be returning to work part-time. Next month, the girls are back in school full-time." She looked at him directly. "We won't need rescuing anymore." The question took him by surprise, though in retrospect it shouldn't have. Their unusual relationship had formed under extraordinary circumstances. Circumstances that were now changing. "The girls need stability," Amanda continued gently. "And you've become part of that stability. They talk about you constantly. Lucy draws pictures of you in her art class. Lily's teacher says she explains chess moves to anyone who will listen, always mentioning how Mr. Jason taught her." Jason felt something tighten in his chest. Over the past 9 months, these 3 people had transformed from a charitable project into something he'd never anticipated, a family of sorts. "I'd like to remain in their lives," he said finally, "not as a benefactor or as a replacement father figure, but as someone committed to their well-being, to your well-being." He hesitated. If that's something you'd want. Amanda studied him, her nurse's perceptiveness reading more than his words conveyed. After a long moment, she reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope. I wrote this during the long nights in the hospital, she explained, handing it to him. When the pain was bad and sleep wouldn't come, I wasn't sure I'd ever give it to you. The envelope bore his name in Amanda's neat handwriting. You don't need to read it now, she said, rising from her chair. But it explains what your intervention has meant, not just the financial support or the medical treatment, but how you transformed 3 lives when we needed it most. She kissed his cheek lightly before heading inside to check on her daughters, leaving Jason alone with the envelope, a bridge between their past emergency and whatever future might unfold. From the edge of the terrace, he could see the nearly completed Catherine Blackwood Oncology Center illuminated against the night sky, a legacy different from the towers of luxury apartments he'd once planned, but infinitely more meaningful. The letter waited in his hands, its contents a mystery that both intrigued and intimidated him. Whatever Amanda had written during those dark hospital nights would shape the next chapter of a story he'd never expected to be part of, yet could no longer imagine being without. 6 months after Amanda's remission was confirmed, 15 months, since that fateful day when 2 determined 6-year-olds had marched into Jason's office, a sleek black car wound its way along the coastal road of Rhode Island. Inside, Jason drove while Amanda sat in the passenger seat, the twins bubbling with excitement in the back. Are we almost there? Lily asked for perhaps the 20th time. Just around this bend, Jason promised, slowing as they approached a private drive lined with ancient maple trees. The house appeared gradually, a graceful shingled structure perched on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic. Large windows captured the panoramic ocean view, while wraparound porches offered sheltered, outdoor spaces. The original century-old cottage had been thoughtfully expanded and restored, maintaining its historic charm while incorporating modern comforts. Is this it? Lucy whispered, her usual quiet voice even softer with awe. This is it? Jason confirmed, bringing the car to a stop in the circular drive. The twins were out of the car in an instant, racing toward the house with unbridled enthusiasm. Amanda moved more deliberately, still building her stamina after months of treatment. It's even more beautiful than the pictures, she said as Jason offered his arm for support up the stone path. Wait until you see inside, he replied. The girls helped design practically every room. The interior revealed the thoughtful collaboration between Jason and the twins, light-filled spaces with comfortable furnishings, walls painted in the soft blues and greens the girls had selected, and countless personal touches. Lucy's artistic influence showed in the carefully chosen artwork and color schemes, while Lily's practical nature was evident in the clever storage solutions and multi-purpose spaces. Your room is upstairs, Mommy, Lily called already halfway up the staircase. Amanda followed the excited tour guides to the master bedroom, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Atlantic. Just as the twins had insisted, the view from the bed captured the horizon where, on lucky mornings, dolphins might be spotted playing in the waves. We picked everything, Lucy explained proudly, showing off the reading nook and window seat. Even the pillows. And look, Lily added, throwing open the doors to a bathroom with a soaking tub positioned to enjoy the same magnificent view. After exploring every corner of the house, they made their way to the expansive back deck. Below, stone steps led down to a private beach, while nearby, the promised garden was coming to life with early spring plantings. The twins raced down to the shore, eager to test the still chilly water, leaving Amanda and Jason alone on the deck. I still can't believe this is real, Amanda said, watching her daughters on the beach below. A year ago, I was preparing them for a future without me. Now you have all the time in the world, Jason finished, the relief in his voice palpable. The key. Catherine Blackwood Oncology Center had been operating for 3 months now, already changing the outcomes for dozens of families. Under Jason's revised leadership, Blackwood Enterprises had embraced a new strategic direction focused on sustainable development, recovering its market value as investors recognized the long-term benefits of the company's evolved priorities. You two Never told me exactly what was written on the back of the drawing the girls gave you that first day, Amanda said, turning toward him. Jason took her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the past months. Besides the request for help, there was a smaller note almost hidden in the corner, he admitted. It said, "Mommy says you look sad like us. Maybe we can be less sad together." Amanda smiled, understanding the impact those childish words must have had. And was that what made you cry? A billionaire moved by children's intuition? Jason looked down at Lily and Lucy building a sandcastle, their laughter carried up by the ocean breeze. I realized that 2 6-year-old girls saw what I'd been hiding from myself for decades. The transformation over 15 months had been remarkable for all of them. Amanda had returned to nursing part-time, now heading a special program at the Catherine Blackwood Center for families of pediatric patients. The twins had blossomed, their natural resilience strengthened by security and stability. And Jason had rediscovered parts of himself long buried beneath ambition and emotional detachment. What happens now? Amanda asked softly. Jason considered the question. The journey that began with a simple drawing had evolved into something neither of them could have anticipated, a connection that transcended gratitude or obligation. Now, he said, we figure it out together, day by day. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Jason and Amanda walked down the stone steps to join the twins on the beach. The girls immediately enlisted their help with the elaborate sandcastle, assigning tasks with the confident authority of children who knew they were loved. The 4 of them worked side by side as the afternoon light turned golden, creating something impermanent, yet meaningful, much like the family they had become, not through blood or obligation, but through choice, circumstance, and the transformative power of love. The ocean waves would eventually claim their sandcastle, just as time would bring new challenges. But as Jason helped Lucy secure a shell atop the highest tower, he knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Some fortunes, he had learned, couldn't be measured in buildings or bank accounts. The true wealth was here on this beach, in the laughter of 2 once frightened little girls and the quiet strength of their mother, a family that had saved him in ways he was only beginning to understand.